Hello and welcome back. Patrick Kane is one of the hottest players in fantasy right now, 11 points in a 6-game point streak, including 6 power play points won in each of those 6 games. So is this sustainable? Well, probably not, but the Wings do have a 4-game week next week, so we'll go over this and a lot more in this video, but first let's do what we always do and take a look at the Week 15 schedule. 51 games this week, only 10 of those are on light nights, the usual Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. 3 games on Monday, 2 on Wednesday and Friday, and then 3 games on Sunday. So what I've highlighted here are the teams that have 4-game weeks but are front-loaded, because you can still add somebody for that Sunday game and get a little bit more volume out of it. So Edmonton has 2 light nights with a Monday and a Wednesday. You've got Florida with the road back-to-back to start the week. And then the Thursday, Saturday, but a relatively easier schedule, at least towards the end with Anaheim and Detroit. You've got Philly. They've got a tough home game against the Panthers, and then they go on the road into Columbus. They have the Islanders and the Devils. Not a ton of travel, but it is very road heavy. Then you've got Calgary. They've got Chicago on the road, and then St. Louis on the road, a road back-to-back to start it off. And then they play again in St. Louis and then in Winnipeg. And then wanted to highlight here, these are 2-game weeks, but they're on the Wednesday, Friday light nights. So if you're looking for some volume on those nights, there are some players that we'll touch on in a minute that are red hot on these teams, but they're not going to get a ton of volume this week. Then the rest of these teams play Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, and you might want to highlight these because you're going to want to pick up some guys for those Sunday matchups to try to come back in your matchup or try to take the lead as you try to close out your week. Buffalo, Carolina, Boston, and Minnesota with the 2-game weeks. Boston with the worst schedule, no light nights. So you might want to think about that if you own Pasternak or if you have Jeremy Swayman in net. There are some options that we'll go over in this video. Now, before we continue, we'll give it back to Spence for this analysis. We touched on this last week, but as we move week to week, you've got Ottawa. They are in the middle of a 4-game per week stretch that started in week 14, goes to week 16. So they've got 8 games this week and next week. So that is worth noting as well. And then with these teams, Calgary, Detroit, Florida, and Philly, they're averaging 3.6 per week or more over the next couple of weeks here. So Calgary between week 15 and 19, 4-3, 4-4-4. Tons of volume out of Calgary. You could pick up a Huberdeau, a Kadri. We'll go over that in a little bit. Detroit has some guys that are available. They've got 3.75 games per week over the next 3 or 4 weeks. You've got Florida, again, 3.75 over the next 4 weeks. And then Philly, this is a longer stretch. They've only got 2 3-game weeks, actually 3 3-game weeks from now until the start of your playoffs. So Philly's going to get a ton of volume heading into your playoffs. So if you need to come back, that's a team that you have your eye on heading into this week. So a number of different options, but let's start it off with the best schedule for week 15, and that is the Edmonton Oilers. Now, as we look over here on the 3D graph, you can see it's Draisaitl and McDavid. They're still doing what they always do, still getting a ton of points, 61 points and 41 for Draisaitl. They are the guys that you're going to want access to. Now, who do you get access to those guys through? There's this little cluster over here on the left. You've got Bouchard, Nugent Hopkins, Hyman. Those are the power play guys. Nurse and Ekholm are the stay-at-home D. Hyman coming into his own here. He's been playing really well. 10 goals, 6 assists, 16 points in 16 games since returning from his injury. And Nugent Hopkins is heating up. 4 goals, 1 assist, 3 power play points in a 5-game point streak for him. Nurse, you're going to get hits and blocks, 2.6 shots per game as well, 1.7 hits per game for Darnell Nurse. Not getting a ton of offense, but he is a hits blocks D who's going to get a ton of ice time with those elite level players. And then there's this cluster right here where we're going to pick from. So Victor Arvidsson starting to play a little bit better, banged up a little bit to start the season. He's come back and he's started to play relatively well. He's line 2 with Draisaitl and Podkolzin. Here is Podkolzin. He's going to get you more hits volume, 2.2 hits per game. So a couple of different options. Let's turn it now to their player hubs. And we'll start it off by looking at Victor Arvidsson. Shot volume is his main feature, 91st percentile there, 2.54 shots per game. Because of that, the goals will start to come. They're not there yet, but he will start scoring. He's got 2 goals in his last 7, but I could see that bumping up playing with Draisaitl and getting some line chemistry with them. He's also power play 2, so I don't know how much that unit gets in terms of time, but it is worth noting that he does get some power play time. So shot volume is the main feature for Victor Arvidsson. Dual position eligibility, 16% owned. So he would be your 12-team target In your deep league play, you're going to want to target Vasily Podkolzin. Same line assignment, second line with Draisaitl, left wing, right wing, dual eligible. 1 goal, 8 shots, and 8 hits in his last 3 games. That hits volume is his main feature. So 87th percentile, 2.2 hits per game. Shot volume is low, no power play production. Everything else is relatively low as well. So he's a depth forward getting an elevated role, basically showing the coach that he's engaged with that physical play, and that gets him on the second line with Draisaitl, but that should perk your ears up if you're in a deep league. You're getting Draisaitl exposure at 1% ownership. And last but not least, we've got Brett Kulak, kind of a blocks defenseman specialty, 88th percentile, 1.59 blocks per game, 3 assists in his last 3 games to go with those blocks, 5 blocks in that span as well. So every now and then, these D like him and Ekholm, who are shut down stay-at-home D, they get exposure to McDavid and Draisaitl and all of these top-end elite offensive players. If it touches their stick and it goes in the net, they're going to get an assist for that. So that is probably why he's a little bit more offensively active. I wouldn't expect that to continue. However, you're going to get the blocks out of Brett Kulak, and he's 1% owned. So he should be there for you in a deep league. Pretty much any league size, he should be available for you. And they do have this nice schedule here: Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. So you can at least get him in the front-loaded schedule and then try to pick up somebody for that Sunday at the end of the week. Now, up next, we have another team that has that front-loaded back-to-back, and that is the Florida Panthers. You've got Matthew Tkachuk leading the way, one of the most complete players you can find, over a point per game, 38 points in 37 games. Here you've got Reinhart and Barkov, who are so similar that it's hard to tell these dots apart. 36 points in 32 for Barkov, 13 power play points is great as well. Then you've got this little island, Verhaeghe and Bennett. Verhaeghe is a little bit better right now. Shot volume is pretty good, 2.9. Hits per game is good at 1.5. Bennett is ice cold. Only 1 assist in his last 10 games. He is 53% owned. I could see him breaking out of this any day now. Anton Lundell is one of your best ads this week. He's got 3 assists, a power play point, 5 hits in a 3-game point streak. And he gets some hits as well, 1.6 hits per game. So there are a couple of options. We'll start it off with Lundell's hub, because it's not just hits. It's not just a couple of points here and there and picking him up when Barkov is injured. He does get some assists, 86th percentile there. 2.1 shots per game is not bad. Hits volume is decent at 72nd percentile, and he does get a couple of blocks. So overall, relatively complete, and this is his ceiling. He's been as high as at least a low 60s player in terms of his combined rating, so there is more room for him to grow as they get this 4-game week, and there are some winnable games with some offense available here. Detroit, Anaheim, even Philly, not the best defensive teams. The Devils are playing pretty good defensively, and they can obviously score, so maybe not that game, but all these other ones have the opportunity for some offense, and that's where Lundell will come into play. 31% owned, center right wing, dual eligible, so that's your 12-team ad for the week. In terms of your deep league ad, Jesper Boquist is red hot right now. You can see him here, 5.1 increase. You can see that here on the graph, going from a 34 up to a 39. Albeit not that high in terms of his combined rating, but you're getting a lot of hits volume, 2.23 hits per game, and you're starting to get some scoring. 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points, and 12 hits in the last 3 games. So for whatever reason, he's the one that is hot right now. Evan Rodriguez is not that hot. Luostarinen is kind of not that hot. So they're, the peripheral guys that you would think of adding in a week like this are underperforming a guy like Boquist, who's at 1% ownership, single position center. So he's your deep league target for the week. Now, before we move on, I just want to highlight some of the other guys in the league who have been getting it done. These are the top scorers in the last 5 games, under 60%, 60% or lower in terms of ownership percentage. And the guys in red have 2-game weeks, so that is worth noting as well. So with that said, Matthew Knies might be your best pickup at 47% owned, 8 points in his last 5 goals, 3 assists, and 17 hits. So a ton of hits from Knies, top 6 exposure to all of those guys that you want in Toronto. And this is going to be a player that if you can find him on the waiver wire, I would ride this hot streak for as long as this holds up, because he's been playing really well. So he's probably owned up in a 12-teamer, but Brandon Saad is definitely going to be available in every league size. He's your deep league target, 6 points in his last 5, 3 goals, 3 assists, 17 shots as well. That's decent. Then you also have another deep league target down here, JVR, 6 points in his last 5, 2 goals, 4 assists. Shot volume is really low, but he does have 2 power play points, power play goal, and a power play assist. With that said, Going back to Columbus here, you've got Voronkov still going really well, and you've got Fantilli with 6 points in his last 5, and Sean Monahan is hurt. So Fantilli could bump up into that top spot, that number 1 center role, and get some more power play time. So that 14% ownership is likely not going to stay for that much longer. I would definitely go out and grab him if you're in need of a center. We'll touch on a couple of other these guys like Lane Hutson in a little bit. Just wanted to go down to the bottom here. You've got Brian Rust, who's always one of the more consistent fantasy options when healthy. But I also forgot to, I didn't forget to add, he's not that productive in his last 5, but Michael Bunting is playing really well right now for Pittsburgh as well. He's playing on the power play unit, getting some power play goals. So I did want to mention him, and Brian Rust obviously is one of the better options getting you Sidney Crosby exposure. So those are 2 guys from Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh can still score, they just can't play defense that well. So just wanted to highlight a couple of guys before we continue on with the video. But up next, we'll take a look at the forward streamers for this week. And most of these guys do have the 4-game weeks. We'll start it off with Patrick Kane on the thumbnail for a reason. He's got 11 points in his last 6 games, and with him, you're getting elite level power play. So 0.31 power play points per game, 92nd percentile there. Shot volume is a little bit low, but everything he's shooting is going in lately. 87th percentile in terms of assists. The only thing that I don't like about this is his inconsistency and the lack of a point ceiling. So he should be around a point per game player. He's been at that in various weeks earlier on in the season, but he just doesn't keep up that pace. So I would not expect this 11 point in 6 game pace to continue for that much longer. However, we have to talk about him because he is red hot, going from a 38 all the way up to a 48. That's a 10-point increase from December 16th until now. So really doing it for at least 3 weeks, if not longer than that. Definitely have to mention Patrick Kane, but he might be owned up at 66% owned. So you can also turn to Jamie Benn, around the same ownership percentage, but a center left wing dual eligible player. He's another guy who is red hot right now and a little bit more complete with 1.44 hits per game. Shot volume is a little bit lower, but relatively complete across everything else. 4 goals, 1 assist, 5 points, and a power play point in a 5-game point streak. He's got a couple of game winners in there as well. So if you have a point league with extra waiting for game winning goals, he's been getting those done. And this is in the wake of a couple of injuries that they have in Dallas that are elevating some other guys into the top 6 and elevating Jamie Benn as well. He's taken that ice time and run with it, and he's led the way for Dallas. Now, speaking of those injuries and the line assignment, Evengii Dadonov, 3% owned. Here's your deep league target. 6 points in his last 7, 2 goals, 4 assists, and he's playing top line with Hintz and Robertson. So that is the main reason to take note of this potential ad at 3%. Of single position right winger. Goal scoring is decent. He's about a 0.5 point per game player. I'd like to see the shot volume higher, and I'd like to see him get a little power play time, but he has been with some of these injuries. So hopefully he can cash in on those. But a really good deep league target with a great line assignment for Dadonov, 3% owned, single position right winger. He's probably there for you in most league sizes. So if you're in a deep league with not a lot on your wire, go out and grab Dadonov. Now up next, we've got a guy I usually love because of his shot volume. Nazem Kadri, 57% owned, 3.41 shots per game is 99th percentile. I believe it's top 10 in the league. He's also 92nd percentile in terms of goal pace. 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points in his last 6, 23 shots in that span, and 2 power play points. So still shooting the puck. He's still one of their top targets. And as we mentioned a couple of slides ago, they do have a really good schedule for the next couple of weeks. So Huberdeau has come alive and he's back to kind of not exactly what he was in Florida, but there were previous seasons where I used to pick him up in the 4th or 5th round and he'd seriously outperform that. And he seems to be doing that again as a waiver pickup that you can go out and grab. I would also add to that Kadri, if he's available. He's their top line center, so he's one of the guys that I would turn to, especially for this shot volume. If you get any benefit from shot volume in your points league, or if you're trying to stuff that category in a categories league, Kadri is always good for that. Now, similarly with those schedules, you've got Philly, who has a really good schedule for the next couple of weeks, and Morgan Frost is available. They really don't have a top-line center. They've got a number of guys that they filter in there. Paling, Frost, Couturier is down on the 4th line right now, but Frost has been elevated. He's got 3 points in his last 2 games, 1 power play point, 2 goals, 1 assist. And then, shot volume is pretty low. I don't like that. He is above a 0.5 point per game, so a little bit better than some of these other guys that we've touched on, like Dadonov, who was below a 0.5 point per game. But with that said, at least he's getting some power play time, 80th percentile in terms of power play points, and he does have 1 power play point in his last 2 games. So this is another deep league target for you on a 4-game week with a front-loaded back-to-back for Philly. But with that said, there's one other offensive ad that you can find who's got a good line assignment. Ondrej Palat, top 6 for New Jersey. They're a team that can score 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points, 8 shots, and 5 hits in just his last 3 games. So 1.7 hits per game and the goal scoring numbers. That's the main reason to own him. I don't like the point ceiling. I don't like the shot volume, and he doesn't get a lot of power play time. So not a lot in terms of other peripherals, but he is getting that line assignment with New Jersey. As I mentioned, they can score. They don't get a lot of production from their bottom 6. You could potentially also go out and get Paul Cotter. He's got 2 goals in his last couple of games, and he is a hitter for sure. But they just haven't gotten a lot of production from their bottom 6. So with that said, the best thing to do is to grab somebody from their top 6, and that's where Ondrej Palat comes in at 1% owned, single position left winger. He would be a decent ad for this week. Now, if you're looking for peripherals, look no further than Garnett Hathaway for hits, 98th percentile, 3.51 hits per game, 30 hits in his last 7 games, and he's got a goal and 2 assists in that span. At 7% owned, he's one of the better hitters you can find, single position right winger. You know what you're going to get out of Hathaway. You're going to get penalty minutes if you're in a league with those. You're going to get a ton of hits, and every now and then he'll chip in with some offense. But if you're looking for a similar profile but a little bit higher offensive ceiling, you can try Will Guhle, who is ice cold in terms of offensive production. He has had a couple of goals called back, but he is one of the best hitters in the league, top 5, 99th percentile, 3.71 hits per game, and his point per game level is way higher than a guy like Hathaway, 0.57 points per game. The goal scoring is decent at 0.26 goals per game. Shot volume is a little bit low. Line assignment, he's pretty solidified on that third line. It just depends on who they've got in the lineup because they're missing Filipino right now, and they're trying to put in guys like Kaliev. They sent Brett Berard down, but Guhle just keeps on keeping on. 17 hits in his last 4 games. That's 4.25 hits per game. So he's back doing what he always does, banging the body. So if you need those hits, if you need point weighting for hits and goals specifically, that's where Will Guhle comes into play, and he should be available for you in a 12-teamer at 29% ownership. Now let's switch it up and look at some of the defensive streamers this week. We've got a couple of guys who are on those nice 4-game weeks. You've got Kaiden Guhle, a block specialist for sure, 99th percentile, 2.39 blocks per game, 1.58 hits per game. So this is a stereotypical hits and blocks play where you're looking for some volume. He's got 19 hits and 14 blocks in his last 7 games to go along with 3 points. So getting a little bit of offense there as Montreal has been a little bit more offensive lately. And Guhle is one of those guys that's not necessarily an offensive powerhouse, but he does get you a ton of peripherals. So if he does get some scoring in there as well, that's going to be really nice for his fantasy file. But another guy you can add from Montreal is Lane Hutson, potentially in a shallow league. 60% owned. He's maybe not there for you in a 12-teamer, but in a 10-team league, he's definitely worth an own. 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points, 3 power play points, and he's got a 4-game point streak, and he's power play 1. So they've had Matheson there. It seems to be Lane Hutson's to run with, 96th percentile in terms of assists, 94th in terms of power play points per game, and he gets some blocks as well, 79th percentile there. Not a lot of hits, not a lot of shot volume, and not a lot of goals. So that's what you're looking at for Lane Hutson. This is basically like an Adam Fox light in terms of his fantasy file. Fox's looks very similar to this, but a little bit higher point per game number from Fox. But Lane Hutson is on pace for one of the best rookie seasons by a defenseman in years. So that's worth noting as well. Now, another guy that we can talk about, and this is basically since the coaching change, Erik Gustafsson has gotten power play 2 line assignment and has taken it and run with it. 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points, 2 power play points in his last 6 games. He's a power play specialist, and some people at the beginning of the year thought that they would give him power play 1 and put Seider on power play 2. They've seemed to reverse that now with the coaching change where Seider's on power play 1 and Gustafsson's on power play 2, but you're still getting somebody with power play exposure at 1% ownership. I would definitely take that and run with it if I'm in a 18 or 20 team league. Gustafsson, you could do a lot worse than, and you can see his ceiling up here, 44 to 56 range. This was early in the season, small sample size, but he should be at least 10 points higher than this, just given where his ceiling is. So if for whatever reason Seider gets hurt, his value will go through the roof as he'll become their power play 1 quarterback. So maybe get out in front of that. I'm not hoping that Seider gets hurt or saying anything that he should, but With that said, Gustafsson always comes in and fills in for those top guys and does a really good job on the power play. So worth noting here, at 1% ownership, he's your deep league play. And then some other guys that we can talk about that aren't on those 4-game schedules. Cam Fowler has been red hot. Obviously, last week he was hot going into this week, and then he maintained that this week. 10 points in his last 11 games, 4 goals, 6 assists, 2 power play points. He's on power play too, so that is worth mentioning as well. They still have Justin Falk, who's quarterbacking the first unit. 94th percentile in terms of blocks. Shot volume is low, absolutely no hits, and he is around half a point per game. So you could do worse, but he is relatively hot right now at 40% ownership. You could continue to ride this wave for the next week or so and see how it goes for you. But I do know some guys in our Discord have other players coming back off injury, and he might be the odd man out. Now, in terms of some other guys you can add, Jackson LaCombe we've talked about for 2 or 3 weeks in a row now. He is power play 1, so that is a feature of his file at 34% ownership to get a guy who's quarterbacking a power play 1. That is why he's on this. So obviously you're getting some power play exposure, 4 points in his last 5 games, 18 shots, and he gets some blocks, 89th percentile there. Shot volume is decent. He's a half a point per game guy. A lot to like about this file. And don't want to go too far into it because we talked about him for the last 2 weeks, but same thing with Radko Gudas. You've got hits and blocks galore with this guy. You know what you're going to get. 97th percentile, 3.29 hits, 2.24 blocks per game, 24 hits in his last 6, and he's been getting some offensive production, 36% ownership for him. You also have Trouba, who we also talked about, but you know what you're going to get. And if you don't know, go and watch last week's video. I touched each one of these files last week, so you can go and look at basically the same thing because they've been continuing this week as well. That's going to do it for the player ads. Up next, let's take a quick look at the goaltending hub. At the goaltending hub, we'll start it with Jakub Dobes. He doesn't have a file because he wasn't on the team at the beginning of the year, and that's kind of how this data is prepared. But with that said, he's got 3 starts, 3 wins, a .97 goals against, .959 save percentage, and 1 shutout. So obviously, whenever he's in, if you're looking to stream somebody, Dobes, and until he's proven that he can't do it, definitely go out and grab him. It's probably not likely that he continues this streak, but he has been really good, basically every time he's been in the net. Now, right beneath him, you've got Askarov. He's at 22% ownership. He's been really good as well. You can see here, .923 save percentage, 2.3 goals against, 3 wins in 7 games. He is above expected, even with that team defense. But with all of that in consideration, in his last game, 19 of 22, .864, and 3 goals against. So not the best start, but I definitely think he is better than Georgiev. So I would imagine they're going to start giving him some more starts. Just by comparison, here is Georgiev, not looking too hot at an .878. He's just looked bad all season long. So Askarov could be a 1A option at 22% ownership. You could definitely do worse than that. Now, a couple of other guys that I wanted to touch on will go up towards the top because this is a guy who, whenever he gets in, you should definitely have him on your roster. Samsonov for Vegas, 62% owned. He might not be there for you, but really good record on the season. 11 wins in 16 games now. They didn't win last night, but he still played really well. 2.07 goals against, .923 save percentage last night. And you can see here in the 2 previous games, he had 2 wins and a .913 save percentage. So you're basically getting 2 goals against or fewer from him, and you're getting really good save percentage because of this team defense being at least 55th percentile, and he is above expected. So Samsonov, whenever he's in, definitely go out and grab him for a spot start. Same type of thing with Casey DeSmith, who is starting today as I record this. .916 save percentage for him. Dallas with that 91st percentile team D is nice as well. Now, another potential starter, if you're in a shallow league, Dustin Wolf should be owned up. .914 save percentage, 2.6 goals against on the season, 2 shutouts, well above expected, 84th percentile there. 3 wins in his last 4, 1.75 and a .937 save percentage. So he's been even better lately, and I don't see why they go back to Vladar ever. They should just keep rolling starts to Dustin Wolf as he's been playing really well. And again, as we mentioned earlier in this video, they've got a ton of volume coming up. So even if they do use Vladar, you'll still get some volume out of Dustin Wolf. A little bit further down the list, we've got a couple of other guys to talk about. Alex Lyon is out right now, but he has been playing a lot better. He's hot and cold. Basically, every couple of games, he has a 4 or 5 game stretch where he's on fire. And this is one of those. 3 wins in his last 4, 1.8 goals against, 929 save percentage. But again, he just went out. And that means Talbot took the net back over. So if Lyon comes back, he's only 15% owned. You might want to just throw a flyer at him and see, Detroit's still not the best defensive team at 30th percentile there. But if he's going to start chipping away at some start volume, that could be a 1A option for you if you're looking for it. Speaking of 1A options, I'm going to have to scroll down to find Sam Ersson, who is finally starting to play better. You can see this trend from a 67 all the way down to a 40, but has jumped up a little bit in recent days. He's 14% owned, but he's got 3 wins in his last 4, a 1.13 goals against, and a 949 save percentage in that span. So he is not very good in terms of goals saved above expected. Hasn't been doing that well this year at all with save percentage. Goals against is decent because of this team exposure. 9 wins in 20 is also decent, just given the fact that he's well below what a league average goaltender would be. So getting the wins and getting decent goals against average, if you're in a points league that has those, if you're in a categories league that has goals against as a goaltending category, he could be an option for you. That could be a potential starter at 14% ownership. So he should be on your radar as well. As I mentioned last week, there's a couple of injuries that are creating some opportunities. Merilainen had a shutout last night. Again, not a guy who was on the team to start the season, but 2 wins in his last 3, 1.71 goals against, 941 save percentage. He's 1% owned. So whenever you see him in, he seems to be playing better than Forsberg. And this is all while Linus Ullmark is still out. So if you see Ullmark back, maybe they'll keep Merilainen. I don't know. He's been better than Forsberg lately, so that is worth noting. And then last but not least, right below him, we've got Connor Ingram, who is back and healthy. You can see what his ceiling was around this level, and even last year, he was the number 1 guy. So last year, he was way above expected. He took the spot and ran with it. Vejmelka struggled. This year, it's been the opposite. Vejmelka's been playing well. Ingram didn't even start that well, so he started up here and then kind of dipped all the way down to a 29. Not very good. Then he got injured. But now he's playing a little bit better. He had a game last night where he played 2 goals against, 30 saves on 32 shots, 938 save percentage. He's 35% owned. So this is really bad in terms of goals saved above expected, but the team defense is decent. And if he can find his game now, you might be able to grab a 1B option at 35% ownership on a team that could be a bubble playoff team. So that's going to do it for this video. If you've got your eye on anybody else that I didn't mention, leave that in the comments section below. We all benefit from that. I want to thank you again for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.